moving on, I'm going to change to this angle so that I don't fuck up my spine or something. Uh, anyway, previously we were just talking about how a slight change in personality totally changed like the trajectory of the entire Johnny and Edgar relationship, which turned out to be like for the best ever. It made me much happier to have it be that way. Yeah. I said that with like a question mark, but no, it was sincerely much happier. Uh, I think even when I first wrote it, like if I had read someone else doing it the way that I just did it, I would have been much happier with that result. But oh well, what can you do? I knew that that was going to be a thing from the beginning because there were drawings from, so there was like the homicides and then the high school. There were drawings from both the homicides and the high school that had Edgar and Johnny as like a thing. Um, this again, like before they were the same thing. They were these two separate entities. So I had like clearly dead Edgar with clearly dead or something Johnny, doing their little thing in hell. Um, and then like the high school one with like the Edgar who was just like fucking bogglingly enchanted by high school Johnny. And I think like part of what made me pick this up and kind of shove it in this was that I was like, how do I reconcile you being like the very same dude that the other one killed? Like, how do I just sit with that? How am I like, yeah, you're not only like chill with playing music with the guy who murdered you, but you're like actively involved with him, apparently. Is this like a weird, like Stockholm syndrome kind of thing? Like, are you just trying to survive while dead? I don't I don't know. And I think because I wasn't able to resolve that in some kind of satisfactory manner, and because I wanted to have both of these things, but not two of these things, like that made that much easier to just fold that right into here, and ta-da, it's makeup. They're not dead after all. Uh, um, I think now I probably would have been able to come up with a reason for this to have worked. Ultimately, I like the combination better, but I'm sitting here now like, how can I make this a thing? The funny thing now is that I don't know that it's ever been stated explicitly, but the the homicides like in the context of SWAN, or the more specifically like reSWAN, I think are now pretending on stage to be this. Like they are dead people and they're murderer and they're all playing and not quite um not quite voluntary about it. Um, Johnny hinted at this a little bit on the Homicides blog, but I don't know that it's been actually mentioned anywhere else. I suppose if you read, all of his like articles and things that go around about them, it would talk more about like the straight up mythology that they've tried to generate. They're not always successful at holding it up because they're like 17 and having like feelings left and right while also trying to do this thing, and everything is really intense, and it's Johnny is admittedly not giving them great direction. So it's like, okay, am I in character now? Am I faking it now? And like Johnny will drop it and pick it up at random times, and so are we following you? Are we not following you? He's a little chaotic in this manner, and I think that's a better translation of him having been a little erratic and a little weird, and just not super stable in canon. Um, than what I had been doing in the first one, which was like just like we're cool, we're cool, we're cool. Sudden random outburst for no reason. We're cool, we're cool, we're cool. Which is definitely like I haven't been through the entire thing, but I'm like 6 or 7 chapters into just kind of casually reading through ish and making notes, and that seems to be the whole story so far. It's just like Johnny has a freak out here, and in like the space under the freak out, other people do things while avoiding him. And then we just kind of do this and we work around the spaces where Johnny has a freak out. Uh, it I mentioned this, I think, in a Tumblr post, and I know this is not supposed to be a lot about Ish, but I forgot mid-sentence what I was saying. That's what happened, which is probably for the best. Yeah, I'm trying to bring that back, and it's gone, so I'll remember later, you know, like 10 minutes into this. So good, we're moving on from Ish. Goodbye. Yeah, now I don't know what to say because I got myself so horrifically sidetracked from all of that. But it was all better to do it the way that I did it with that relationship. And the thing was, is even once I took, this is good, I'm so glad I have like these placeholders for these things. Even once I took homicides and merged it into high school, there was still so much stuff that I was just like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this. And now it's like I can see why it's a good idea just to write like an entire first draft, like the whole fucking thing, and then just come back a few years and rewrite that later and like call that like a massive amount of editing, because it made reSWAN a lot easier to write when I knew like the basic shape of what was happening, and then like, you know, just maybe I changed some details or something here and there, but like the core and the structure of the story are the same. Again, like for the most part, like there's that discrepancy as far as like when Johnny and Edgar get together, but it's mostly like the same story. Like Invisible Dude shows up at school and meets all these weird ass people, and then they kind of put him through some shit, but they all become weird bros, and then they decide, hey, maybe we ought to try to be out there in the world and do something and affect something, so let's make some songs or some garbage. And then they do that, and kind of in the meantime, like weird things are happening to them and the world or something, and then they end up in Johnny's house and it's terrible. Then people are in love, and then Johnny dies, and Pepito is there. You know, I mean, if it's the same kind of, like, it hits the same major marks, even if it doesn't, like, always get there in the same way, and I'm thinking that that's what's going to happen with Ish as well, which is good, because that was the thing that was doing this, and it's, like, exhausting and painful for me to read. I'm so deeply attached to and invested in Johnny and Edgar as a thing that, like, seeing them have like a long-term like fight or difficulty or whatever the hell it was that they were having was like deeply disturbing to me. I was so upset by it, and I don't think I initially wrote it to be that upsetting. But I was very sad and very upset. And I think it's because I'm literally fresh off of spending every day with these weird kids for an entire year. And I've been spending like a good chunk of even the past 3 years with them. Like, I was doing other fandom things, but it was actively in the background of things, if not in the foreground, since I decided to rewrite the thing in the first place. So it's like extra traumatic to see them not doing well or whatever. I'm like, no, this won't do. So we won't be doing any of that. We're just gonna remove this entirely, and we'll make this entire story about like communicating. And you know, I was just joking with somebody the other night, like, here, look at my Johnny the Homicidal Maniac fanfic. The relationships are extremely healthy. Like, yes. There's that whole, like, you missed the point of the comics again. But, and whatever. I used to be really, really scared of posting all of this because of that. Like, people were pretty terrible. There was an anti-SWAN stamp on DA for a long time. It may still be up there. I favorited it at one point, though, because I was like, this is grand. Like, I've become noticed enough that someone felt the need to sit there and MS Paint an anti-SWAN stamp. I don't think anybody used it. A lot of people were just like, all right, dude, whatever. Because the person who made that was like a notorious drama queen. That's maybe the best word I have for that. I was gonna say troll, but they were entirely sincere. They were just batshit. So whatever. But so it's good. Like, I could have I could have like people who reacted really strongly in the negative, and then all these people who reacted really strongly in the positive. Good. That's what I'm gonna keep with. Uh, but yeah, like there were whole chunks of like the ending and the middle where I just didn't really have any idea what I was gonna do with it, and you can see it for sure in the original version of the story. There's just kind of long chunks of time where I was like, all right, maybe if I just keep writing and they keep talking, the plot will come out of one of them. So that I mean that was why there were a lot of chunks to reSWAN that didn't exist in the original, because they were just like literal 2 paragraphs in the original. Like I started one chapter with a paragraph that essentially was like the equivalent of seeing 2 years later on the screen when you're watching a movie. Like that that was it. It was just gone. And then after the 2 years, like, all right, Edgar is fully integrated into the group and we're a go. And it really only served so that I didn't have to try to figure out how to work Edgar in, which was much harder then because he didn't really have a dark sense of humor or any kind of like weird like niche interests or like something that made him like, oh, he's clearly one of these two. Like I think it's much more obvious in reSWAN, especially after he kind of gets going and just gets used to like, oh my god, there's people. It's clear that he's kind of on their wavelength with things. And he doesn't immediately jump to, yes, let's make a blood sacrifice to keep the roof of this building. But he does have kind of the same black humor. He doesn't always think of like the most virtuous thing to do first. I feel I should point out, because I keep noticing myself doing it, that I keep looking kind of off up out there. I've got a Johnny doll sitting up on the sofa over there, and I keep just looking at it while I'm talking and thinking of other junk to say, and it's because it's just right in front of me and it's a face and I keep looking at it. So my options are like my own face, the camera, or the Johnny doll. So sorry. It's just I've got this tendency, because I get used to telling stories, that I go and like find all of the face points and try to hit them all equally. I'm sorry. But that's what that's about. So yeah, it's more obvious that Edgar fits now. And before I skipped over that because I think I just wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to figure out, how do I make this person who's like kind of bland and just lets things happen to him like properly assimilate into a group of people who are this weird. And they're even weirder in reSWAN now. Like the blood thing was not really a part of that, at least not as big a deal. It wasn't as obviously a regular thing that they did. There's huge chunks that now feel like critical to how reSWAN progressed that were not in the original, that make me feel even more that there must have been like just huge swaths of time where I was just begging the characters to say something that was plot. Because the reflections were not in the original at all. It wasn't like, oh, it was just Edgar, or no, it was just not there. And that's what's wild to me too, is that when I decided to start writing this, like from the very first line of the new story, it was a different story. And I don't know why I did it that way, because I had never intended to write any more than the first chapter. Like I was driving home in my car from an art show. I stopped by like a fucking Kmart to just like buy a bag of underwear, and I got back in my car and maybe a song came on or something. I don't really remember what triggered it, except that I hope it was like the art or a song and not the underwear. But I was like, it'd be fun to rewrite that first chapter. Yeah, let's do that. And so like, I literally just went home and just sat down at the computer and went. And again, I never planned for it to be a totally different story, or maybe I just thought it was like a novelty, like, let's see if I could like inject some like weird personality and supernaturalness to Edgar so he fits better from the start. That's cool. And then I just kept being like, oh, we don't actually meet Johnny in the first chapter. Haha, well, I mean, we can't leave it at that, so let's do another one. And then it was, oh, but Johnny and Edgar's house was so cool. I should do that chapter too. And that literally every single one, it was just like, oh, we should go to the roof. The roof is great. And so I'm like 6 chapters in before I'm like, I should probably just like post this and admit to the fact that I'm doing at least this much. And even then, I think even like 5, 6, 8, I don't know, maybe 10 chapters in, I was still like, I'm probably not gonna finish the whole thing. But isn't this neat? Like, yeah, what the hell? Like at this point, I know myself better than that, and I'm not talking about ish as a hypothetical thing. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna go down. That's where we're at. But anyway, the point of all of that was that I didn't know really what was supposed to happen or what was gonna happen in like large chunks of the Swan story. And so I think in the original you can see there's like a big high at the beginning, and then there's just kind of like this lag, and then it goes again. So in here there was going to be all this stuff, like I have drawings of Edgar and Johnny like using the items that they've got. So the key and the book, something else, I think, some other item, and they were symbolic of them both having been chosen by like heaven and hell, because of course, why not? And the big reason why they weren't supposed to be together or whatever was this whole, like heaven and hell, oh no, sort of. Like everyone has done that trope, I think, at least once, usually when they're about 15, so I was probably right on the line for getting that shit done. But it was a lot of like, well, they're devoted to each other, so they were fighting off the people who were supposed to be like their compatriots or something, which was why like Johnny had such an antagonistic relationship with Pepito. Like he was supposed to be like Pepito's inferior for a while, or they were supposed to be like on the same side, just in like a hierarchical thing or whatever. And he was, I think, even subconsciously or something at the beginning, like rebelling against that. And you can see little hints of it in the original Swan. I feel like I'm talking about this enough that it's going to make people curious to go read it. Like, please don't. I've thought about just making like a highlights reel of the original and being like, look, here are the few lines of clever dialogue that you missed. Please don't read it. But there were a few snips in places. I think, again, like when I just couldn't make anyone else advance the plot, I would go and find Pepito, which was also like literally what the characters did. Like they would sit around for a while and be like, I don't know what to do. I don't know either. Do you want to go bother Pepito? Yeah, let's do that. So the narrative would sometimes actually switch to him or Todd. And in the new one, like in reSWAN, I wanted to make sure that I was consistently like, no, it's staying with just these kids. Mostly Johnny and Edgar, but like a few like Debbie, Jimmy, Tenna thrown in there for variety or whatever shit. Because I like alternate perspectives on things. I think that's cool. But like Pepito and Todd were just too far out. But I did them originally because it was, my plan was to have them like, here's Edgar and Johnny doing their thing, and then here's kind of like, oh, weird shit's happening in the background. And my plan was for it to all like kind of funnel down into some bigger event, and it all makes sense. I was planning that like also while putting it up on the internet, so like at a certain point, the original Swan, like those moments kind of petered out, or I found a way to like shift the direction that they were heading in. Because I guess I decided against like the epic battle of like 2 kids fighting against supernatural forces with small household objects. There's definitely pictures of this though. Like I definitely drew some drawings of them both like terrified, clutching these things and realizing that I don't know what I was like, were they going to shoot lasers with them? Like I don't exactly know what was happening, but the imagery was interesting to me. It might still be. I don't know. But there was an element there of Pepito doesn't want this to happen because Edgar is not supposed to be part of the system. He's somebody else's thing to deal with. It ended up being that like that Pepito was in kind of his own way trying to help, which I like. I think that's kind of an attractive thing. Um, the cool, I don't know if cool is the word, but the interesting thing about Pepito, I think, like a lot of people reacted pretty badly to him during the course of reSWAN, which is fine. He's the son of Satan. He doesn't give a shit. But that he's literally in the same position that Johnny is. He doesn't have a whole group of people, he just has Todd. But he also like exists outside of a reality. Johnny has like maybe 1 foot inside reality, and Pepito doesn't have any. Neither does Todd, really. All the stuff that happened to them kind of pushed them outside of reality. So like the movie of reality is moving through here, and Todd and Pepito are just chilling over here, like, yo, I'll do anything. So he is similarly like kind of in charge of his little crew, which is just him and one other person, but he's equally devoted to, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I have to do to make life easiest for me and mine. So like had the story been reversed, like Johnny was the villain of that story, in that he was consistently fucking things up, and he's now like trapped Pepito in some kind of job that will keep him and Todd kind of stuck where they are for like ever. And I like saying that Johnny was the villain of that story because he says that himself in the comics. That's charming. Now that I've said that out loud, I might like try to use that in upcoming ish adventure. I think that'd be fun. I like doing the callbacks to the comics a lot, and I think I crammed more of them in this time more subtly than I managed to the first time. So yay for progress or something. I feel like I have both a lot of plans and absolutely no idea what I'm doing for upcoming things, so that's cool. I'm trying to think of like what other weird almosts there were. I feel now almost like the fake dating was an almost, even though that definitely legitimately happened in the first version, but maybe to most of you watching it's an almost because it happened in like the forbidden version that Lady doesn't want you to read. I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do with that. I don't really want it up anymore, but I understand that it's got a lot of like nostalgia value for people, and I appreciate the value of archiving old garbage, but at the same time I almost want to make sure that if people are reading it, they are doing it for nostalgia value. Like, I would absolutely hate for someone to read that story the first time through and have that be their first experience with it, and maybe their only experience with it, because like it would be my only experience with it. Like right now, like if I read that thing blind today, like I think I would bail. Not that it's like horrible, but I like there are ideas and concepts and just things in there that from a lesser educated time, a lesser educated person, so it's difficult to read. I have a harder time, I think, with looking at old writing than looking at old art. And I think, again, it's just like the level of revealing. I've always had issues with the level of reveal in art versus writing. I feel like I can hide more and say more at the same time in art. No, that's not what I'm supposed to be talking about. So that's not what I'm going to talk about, but it's similar. It's similar there. Like I look at the old one and I'm just like, please don't. There were a lot of old versions where there were a lot of old versions that ended up like the new version. Like there was one where like Pepito found Edgar and Johnny in the choir room doing something like obviously coupley bullshit, like kissing or some garbage. Um, and I eventually abandoned that for some reason. I think again it was that I couldn't get them to like same page enough to get together. It had to be Edgar saying something outrageous suddenly out of nowhere, like, "Hey, we should date," and Johnny like, "Lol, that'd be funny." It's like even then I still couldn't do it. Uh, so, ow, cool. Just stabbed myself with a couch somehow. So that's great. Yeah, I lost I lost that train of thought too. So, yeah, maybe maybe I'll stop this, rewatch it, and then like continue in a third one because you definitely want to listen to me talk about this for an hour and a half.